The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of ParaX, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
It's coming.
All these voices. All these voices. All these things you can't explain. All these painful memories. They keep haunting you and daunting me. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoking gasoline. It's just a ghost of you and me. Of you and me. All these whispers.
My name is James Hershey. Right back.
All these shadows in my mind. But my reflection I can't find. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoking gasoline. It's just a
That ought to
ghost
do
of
it.
you and me. Of you and me. Don't let 'em take you away. Don't let 'em bring you down inside. It's just the mirrors in your mind. Don't let 'em bring you down.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Staring into the Abyss. I am your host, horror author James Hershey Jr., and with me, as always, my co-host, old boy James Ash. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing pretty good. How's everybody tonight?
We did an episode in the past about black-eyed children, and this episode is going to be a little bit of an update and a little bit of an add-on as well, because in this episode we're going to be talking about black-eyed children and some new information that has come out about them. And we're also going to be talking about black-eyed adults, which is a fairly new and unheard of phenomenon. So for those that don't know what black-eyed children are, they're basically these creepy kids with completely black eyes. And what they do is they will come up to your car or they will come up to your home and knock, and they will ask to come in. And they can't enter your home or get into your car unless you allow them to come in. But they just keep asking to come in, and they're very, very creepy, and they scare the hell out of everybody, basically. Now, the overwhelming majority of the stories and the witness accounts, the people never let them in. They never let the black-eyed kids either into their car or into their house. But there's a few reports that have surfaced recently of people that actually did. The first report I want to talk about comes from a woman that lives in the rural part of Vermont. Now, she claims that about a year ago, she was woken up by a very loud banging sound at her front door. Now, she lives out in the boonies, and that night there was a very bad snowstorm. So she thought that maybe somebody had an accident out on her road and needed help. So she got up and she went to see who it was. Now, she had a motion sensor light on her front porch, and when she looked out the window, she saw that the motion sensor light had come on. And she looked over to her right and she could see footprints coming from the road all the way to her house. But there was no car anywhere that she could see. The road was completely covered with snow, and she didn't see any sign of the snow being disturbed. So there was no like tire tracks in the snow or anything like that. It looked like nothing had been on that road. She looked to the left towards the door, and she could see that there was someone standing there by her front door. Now, at this point, something just didn't feel right to her. She started feeling creeped out. So she went and she woke her husband up. And while she was waking her husband up, the banging started at the front door again. So her husband got up and he went to the door, and she waited right there by the door in the hallway. When he opened up the door, there were two children that were standing there in the snow looking down at the ground. Now, she says that it was a boy and a girl, and they looked to be no more than 8 years old. She also said that they were dressed very strangely and that they had weird haircuts. The girl had extremely long, straight hair, and the boy had a bowl cut look. She also said that they were not dressed properly for the very cold winter night. She said that her first thought was that they were either Amish or Mennonite children because they had that old-timey look. But she didn't know of any groups of Amish or groups of Mennonites that lived in the area, so she didn't know if that's what they were or not. She said usually her first reaction if she saw a couple kids standing in the cold without any coats and just wearing just pants and shirt, that she would rush them inside and bundle them up in a blanket or something and make them some cocoa or something, right? But she said that in this instance, she felt the exact opposite of that. She didn't want to invite them in and make them cocoa and bundle them up. She was actually afraid of them. And the idea of letting them inside her home terrified her. She said that they were very, very unnerving and that they wouldn't make eye contact with them. They just kept looking down at the ground. When her husband asked them if everything was okay, the only thing that they would say is, "Can we come in?" And her husband looked over at her and asked what he should do. Should he let the kids in or not? And she stepped up and asked the kids where their parents were. Now the children, the only thing they would say when she asked that was, "They will be here soon." Now she thought it was strange because it was 2 o'clock in the morning and here were these two kids, very small children, standing alone in the snow without coats or anything on, all by themselves, with no parents around. And every instinct inside of her told her not to let these children in her home. But for whatever reason, she did anyway. So her husband led the kids into the living room, and she headed off to the kitchen to make them some hot chocolate. Now, while she was making the hot chocolate, she could hear her husband in the living room questioning the children. He asked them if they were okay. He asked them where they came from, how far they walked, if their parents' car broke down, and those kind of questions. Now, after every question, the children had the exact same answer. They just kept saying, "Our parents will be here soon." Now, that's a very creepy idea that these kids just kept saying the same thing over and over again. But she said that they also, when they spoke, they used a very eerie, sing-songy kind of voice. So it's almost like they were like telling an old nursery rhyme, kind of like da na 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 na, like that kind of feel, I guess, to it. She said that she had her cat with her in the kitchen, and the cat walked to the edge of the kitchen and looked into the living room, and he saw the children. And when he saw those two children, all the hair stood up on his back. And the cat began growling and hissing and actually backed underneath the kitchen island area where the counter and everything was. And she got the cocoa and she walked into the living room. The children were sitting on the couch, just as still as can be. And her husband was sitting there holding his head in his hands. And she asked her husband what was wrong with him. And he said that suddenly he was feeling very, very dizzy. And she turned towards the children to give them their hot chocolate. And the children looked up at her. And what she saw made her gasp. Pure terror rose up inside of her as she saw that the two children had pure black eyes. There was no white at all in the eyes. It wasn't like the pupil was black and the rest of it was white. The entire eye was black, no white at all. So needless to say, she really was freaked out, but she was trying to keep her composure, is what she said. And she said that the kids stood up in unison, and they asked if they could use the bathroom. Now, at this point, she was extremely scared, and all she could really do was just point down the hall towards where the bathroom was. The children walked down the hall, and they went into the bathroom together. When the children went into the bathroom, the woman turned to her husband and asked him if he had seen their eyes as well. He said yeah, but he thought that maybe the eyes were black because they had been in a car accident. Maybe it was some sort of injury. And they were trying to figure out what they were going to do when all of a sudden her husband's nose started to bleed. Now, he had no real history of nosebleeds before. I mean, everybody gets nosebleeds in your life, I guess, but according to her, there was no history of chronic nosebleeds. And she, somehow inside of herself, she knew that it had something to do with these children. And it really upset her, and she started crying and looking around for tissues to give him. They didn't have any tissues in the living room, so she headed off down the hall into the other room to get him a box of tissues and bring back. Now, she was in the hallway after getting the tissues off the stand, and she was heading back to the living room when the power went out in the home. And she could hear her husband screaming her name. So she started to rush back down the hall towards the living room. But she stopped dead in her tracks because she saw the two children were standing at the end of the hall by the living room. And she says at this point she had never been more scared in her entire life. She was just frozen in place. She could not move. She was so scared. Now this went on for what she said seemed like a couple minutes, where she just stood there scared and they just stared at her. And then after what seemed like forever, the children looked at her and said that their parents were here now. And then they turned and they walked right out the front door. They just opened it up and walked right out and left it wide open. Now the husband jumped up off the couch and he ran, trying to close the door. But he wasn't doing too well, so he started stumbling and bumping into furniture and the wall and stuff. But he managed to make it to the door and shut the door and locked it real quick. She was unfrozen at this point, and she ran down the hall to the window to see where the kids had went. And she looked out and she saw there were two men standing by a black car that was idling at the end of her driveway. She claims that both men were wearing identical black suits and that they were each at least 6 feet tall. Now the men were standing there, and once the woman started watching them, it was almost like they knew she was watching, because in unison at the same time, their eyes turned towards the window and they looked dead at the woman. And they just stared at her for a minute, and then they got in the car and they drove off. After the men in the car left with the kids, the power came back on. Now you would think, okay, cool, they survived, it's over. But the ordeal went on. Over the next couple months, 3 of their 4 cats went missing. They just have no idea where they went. They just disappeared. They're gone. Either ran away or something happened to them. They were just gone. The 4th cat, they found that cat lying in a pool of blood on the kitchen floor. Now, this is the cat that had walked in, seen the kids, and freaked out and hid underneath the counter thing. That cat they found in a pool of blood on the kitchen floor. The husband's nosebleeds started happening more and more frequently until they ended up being a thing that happened every single day. So every day he was getting these nosebleeds now. He went to the doctor, and the doctor diagnosed him with a very aggressive form of skin cancer. Now, after the diagnosis of her husband, she started getting dizzy spells, and then she started having nosebleeds as well. And that is the end of the report. That's all the information that I have on this woman. I don't know what ended up happening to her. I don't know if her and her husband ended up dying or what, because at the time where she actually gave this witness report, they were still alive. But I don't know if they are now. Now, a couple of interesting things here. First thing is the 2 men in the black suits that were standing next to the car. To me, that sounds like, you know, a Men in Black kind of visit, where you have the 2 guys, identical black suits, dressed exactly the same, standing by a black car. So I wonder, is that maybe a Men in Black situation where you have government officials visiting and picking up these kids? Does that mean that the black-eyed children are somehow related to the Men in Black? Are they traveling with them? Are the Men in Black controlling the black-eyed children somehow? Or is it just a coincidence that they had on black suits? Some very interesting questions there. The second thing is the skin cancer diagnosis. Now this reminds me of like a radiation burn or radiation sickness, or what they would call moonburn syndrome. Now moonburn syndrome is something that is common with people that have close encounters with UFOs or with aliens. So that also ties in a little bit, I think, with the Men in Black thing. If they're having moonburn syndrome, if that's what that was, then does that mean that black-eyed children are aliens? Because we talked about that on our last show, that that's one possibility, is that the black-eyed children are some sort of hybrid between aliens and humans. probably the gray aliens is what we thought, because the gray aliens have the big black eyes. They can communicate telepathically. There's a lot of the same things that the black-eyed children, their powers that they possess, are supposedly possessed by the gray aliens. So I wonder if that lends some credibility to that theory, that maybe black-eyed children are hybrids of humans and aliens, where aliens will abduct human beings, take them up, and perform experiments on them. Maybe they're impregnating women, and black-eyed children are the result. Could be. Now, the next witness report comes from a woman in the UK. Her name is, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but it's either Esme or Esma or something like that. It's ESME is the woman's name. Now, she claims that she met the black-eyed adults with her boyfriend. Now, this is a little bit different because these are black-eyed adults. There were no children in this encounter, but they were adults that had black eyes. Now, she claims that in 2012, her and her boyfriend were living in a place called Lee Woods that's just outside of Bristol, UK. And she said one day around 10:30 a.m. they were walking down a path that led to the bottom of the gorge, and they came upon a group of 4 people. The first person was a short, middle-aged man with a pointy gray beard and completely black eyes. The second was a very tall, middle-aged woman, and she also had completely black eyes. The third was a teenage boy who seemed to be around 17 or 18, and he had a troll-like underbite and completely black eyes. All 3 of these people were very, very white, so they were very pale white, like unnaturally white. The last person of this group was a very beautiful black girl, around 20 years old. Now, the black girl had normal eyes, so she was not pale white like them, obviously, and she had normal eyes, not the completely black eyes that the other 3 had. Now, the woman says that they were walking in a very, very weird way, like almost like their skin didn't quite fit, or like their limbs were bending in places where there's not supposed to be any joints. And it just looked very strange and chaotic the way they were walking. Now, the older man and the older woman, as they were passing by, the woman and her boyfriend said good morning to them. And the older woman and the older man looked over at them when they said good morning. And they didn't answer them. They just stared at them with this very creepy look and this creepy, unsettling smile. The woman said that this really stood out to her because in the area they lived, it was a very small rural area, so it was a small town kind of environment, and everybody talked to everybody. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody was friendly with each other. So for somebody to be rude like that and not say good morning back when they said good morning to them was a very strange thing to them. But that's what she said happened, was that they just looked at her in a very strange way with a very creepy smile. She said that when they stared at them, it felt like they were looking deep inside of her mind, and she was filled with an overwhelming sense of fear. The young man had this look of intense rage on his face, like he was about to snap and go postal at any second. And the young black girl, she just stared straight ahead with this vacant look, almost as if she was hypnotized or something. Now, it had been raining very heavily the last few days before they saw these people, and the path had several very large and deep puddles in it. Puddles that would come up over the top of your shoes, is what the woman said. Now, the black-eyed family just walked straight through the puddles, like they didn't even know they were there. They didn't react to the water going in their shoes. They didn't react to anything. They just walked straight through it like it was no big thing. They thought that was very strange, the woman and her boyfriend did. And the black-eyed family just passed on by and walked on down the path out of sight. And the woman turned to her boyfriend, and they both kind of said almost at the same time, as, "Man, wasn't that strange? That was so weird." Now, about a year later, the boyfriend ended up dying at the age of 22 in a very weird and mysterious way. According to the woman, they were in that same area still, and slightly further down the path is the river. So they were down in that same basic area, and she said that the man started hallucinating, the boyfriend did. And he was hallucinating that he was talking to a girl named Sally, but there was nobody there. she said she didn't see anybody, but he was talking to the thin air. And there were several other people in that area because it was a crowded area at that point. There was a lot of people around, and they all kind of backed that story up and said the same thing, that the guy was just talking to the thin air. Now, all of a sudden, he turned and just lunged into the river. I'm not even going to say dove into the river, because according to the witnesses, it was a very haphazard kind of just throw himself over into the river. There was no pretty dive about it. He made his way out to the middle, and he was screaming at the top of his lungs for Sally, to help Sally. He needed to help Sally. And he kept getting pulled under the water. He kept going under and popping back up and yelling for Sally. Now, like I said, there was a lot of people there at this time, and several of them had small boats. And they went out in their boats into the middle of the river, and they were trying to rescue him. But he just kept fighting them off and refusing to get in the boats and refusing to be helped, because he said he had to save Sally before he got in the boat. Now, the boyfriend ended up drowning and dying, obviously. The police searched the river for several days afterwards, trying to find a second body, trying to find Sally. But they never could find any sign of any other body that was down in the river. They pulled him out, but they could not find this Sally person that he was supposedly trying to save. Now, Esme says that somehow deep inside of her, she knows, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that it was the black-eyed adults that caused her boyfriend to drown. And that is the end of that witness report. Now, what I wonder, was Sally the black girl? Was that her name? Was Sally maybe? Because they never got any of their names. They never mentioned it. Or was the middle-aged tall woman Sally maybe? To me, I'm thinking it might have been more likely that it was the black woman that was Sally, because they said that she was walking along with a vacant stare, like she was hypnotized or in shock. So to me, that makes more sense that he would be trying to save her than he would be trying to save the middle-aged woman who looked at him all creepy and scary looking. She didn't seem in the story to be somebody that would need saving. She seemed to be a more sinister character. Sally seemed to be a victim in the witness report. She seemed to be somebody that was being held against her will, being subdued or controlled somehow. So I wonder if the person that he was talking to, that Sally, was that black girl that he had seen a year earlier. Or I wonder maybe he's just on drugs or something, and it's just, the girlfriend getting creeped out by something that happened a year ago and connecting the two when there's no real connection. There's no way, I guess, to really prove one way or the other, but to me it's just extremely, extremely interesting. So I'm going to throw over to Old Boy, and I want to get his input and his thoughts on, first of all, both of these witness reports, and what he thinks about if that person, that Sally that he was trying to save and that he was talking to, if that person was that black girl, and maybe he was seeing either a replay of what happened, because a lot of hauntings will be like that. It'll be just replays of tragic events that happened. Maybe they walked on down the path a little ways out of their sight, because that's where the river was, and maybe these black-eyed adults either threw Sally in the river, or they made Sally just walk out in the river and drown herself. Maybe he was seeing a ghostly replay of that and watching Sally go out in the river, and he was trying to save her. Maybe that's what happened. To me, that seems to make sense. So I want to find out from Old Boy what he thinks about this. So, Old Boy, go ahead, brother.
And thank you for throwing that over to me, James. And I want to just say, yeah, we did a show about a year ago about black-eyed children, and it was a great show if you guys can check it out. This is more of about the black-eyed adults, but the children do go into mix with it, because we talked about it a little bit, about the children in Vermont with the black eyes, and he wants to know what I think. Well, with that issue, with the thing that happened with the two people with the nose bleeding and the children and the adults, what I think is that everything you said was about, the men in black. That could be a possibility. The only thing it's weird about is how the cats died. Now, cats have a sixth sense, and they can sense evil. And when you said the cat died, all of them, three of them disappeared, and the one it saw, they probably killed the cat because the cat was protecting them from dying. Remember the movie from Stephen King? I think it was Sleepwalkers, where the cats protected the family from those creatures from that movie, and that's because they can sense evil. So can dogs. They have a sixth sense. So do cats, especially cats. And when cats don't like something, that should tell you because they're very attunative. And that explains a lot to me because that means there's something supernatural about these kids. Because this has happened to another man. I think it was in Boston, and it was years. It was like 5-6 years ago, and he had somebody outside of his door, and he could see him. And then they kept knocking, and he told them to leave. He didn't let them in. He opened the door, but he didn't let them in. But they didn't leave either. They kept watching him, and he called the cops. And then the cops came, and they just disappeared. So I've heard stories like that, and where I first originally heard these stories of the children was from my friend who was a truck driver, and he started telling me stories about it a couple years ago. Now, the black-eyed adults is something new, and I've only really heard about it recently in the last couple months. And what I've heard is it's pretty much the same thing as the black-eyed children. They come up, ask you questions if they can come in, or there's some kind of accident happened, and they're tall with dark black as black eyes. You can't even see their eyes. And they ask weird questions, but with the adults, some things happen, weird things. People end up getting sick after they leave, or they die. And I've read a couple stories about them. And that means that there's two theories I have with these creatures. They're either supernatural because of the cat thing, and that throws off the whole alien idea that I have too, and I'm going to get to that in a minute, because the cats died. That's a sign that something evil killed them so they couldn't protect the people. And now I don't know what happened to the people because he never said anything if they died or not, but they got sick. And the cats died because those were the things protecting them. Just like if a ghost, they don't like animals. They don't like dogs because they can see them and sense they're there. Basically, they see them, we can't. Some people can. Some people do have the ability. I can sense when things are watching me. I can see things sometimes. Some people are different than others. But with these things, it makes sense to me why these things happen to them. Because something evil, what it means is a human can't take something like this. A supernatural being, it doesn't matter if they're good or bad, a human being can't grasp the reality of what they're seeing. It's something that you're dealing with that you're not supposed to be seeing. And that's why things like this happen. They're sick. Now, the other theory is that they're aliens, or they're some kind of product from the alien, the Men in Black, so that becomes extraterrestrial. And they're letting these kids out because I think they're mixed with, the Greys, that's what I'm thinking, and they're seeing what their powers are. And they have the power of telekinesis, guys, and I think they have that power. Because what they're telling me, what it's saying in the stories, is it's somebody that's 6 years old to 16. So these are children. And then the adults grow up to be more powerful, but they send these children to see what they actually can do. And that would make sense, because the Men in Black thing, they even showed up with the Mothman. They've been at Roswell. So that kind of trips me out too, that story there. But a lot of these stories don't have the adults with them. Only some. So that, and the stories are very eerie. Like the guy was in his car and a kid asked him if he can get a ride, and he said no, and the kid got angry and pissed off and started yelling. And he took off, but the kid just disappeared. So that shows me that it's paranormal. And I think it's more evil than anything. What I think it is some kind of a demon that these people were either killed on the road or kidnapped or something, and that was their curse. And these are demons that are trying to get your soul or trying to do harm to you. Like Odd Thomas. There's demons that just want to see you burn and the world burn. So basically they just want to see how many people they can hurt. So to me, it sounds like we can both, me and James Hershey can agree it's not good. Whatever it is not good because I have not heard one good story about the black-eyed people at all. Adults, children, cats, whatever. I have not heard one good story about these, and that's one thing me and James have read stories about. They're not good. The energy they have is bad. It's supernatural. They're inhumans, but they're not humans like you think. They're bad. There's something you don't want to be involved in. Like me and James were talking about, and he was talking about earlier, is these things seem to be just bring dread, and you get sick from it. And that makes sense because that means it's so evil, it makes you sick being around evil. It's like pure evil. So whatever these things are, they're evil. And they're not good. You shouldn't pick them up and pick anybody up if this is true. Like I said, I haven't said this is true or not. I'm still on the back and forth with this. I think I'm more believing they exist, 65-35, but I believe that there's some truth to this because they've arrested people with black eyes, and it just sounds like there's too many stories coming out now. And creepypasta, yeah, kind of exaggerated it, and you know how that goes. They've made a lot of things, people, over the internet, and that was just like a story for kids and stuff like that, but there's more to it. Creepypasta got the story somewhere. They didn't just some guy make it up. People got to realize, people just don't make something up. It goes in your head. You get an idea. Something talks to you. You don't even realize that it's being put in your head. You just didn't get up one day, I'm going to make a jet. Come on. I don't care how smart you are. You just don't get an idea. There's stuff that happens. There's things that come into your head that's not an accident. And people need to realize that. But we did a show about it was like about 13 months ago, and it was really a great show if you guys can listen to it because it explains a lot about the black-eyed children too. Because the adults, I really didn't find a lot about them. I've heard a little bit about them, and we're just starting to find out about them. And now instead of calling them adults, children, I'm just going to call them black-eyed people. And if you guys can look this stuff up because it's really interesting. These things are really weird looking. Darkest night eyes. I've never seen anything like that. That's crazy. And I don't think these people are making it up. Because my friend told me that he had talked to people truck driving and they had encounters with these kids. Not the adults, the kids. So I believe that there's a very possibility these exist. And they might be reapers. And I don't know if you agree with me that, James, or not, but that's a new assessment I'm starting to think.
First of all, with the cats, I have to disagree a little bit because to me it seems perfectly logical that the cats would die. Because if what we were dealing with was some sort of radiation poisoning, then a small animal like a cat is going to have a much lower tolerance for radiation than a human being. The cat will die long before the human will die from a much lower dose of radiation. So if that's what we were dealing with in that case, then it makes complete sense that the cats would die long before the humans would. But that being said, I don't believe that the black-eyed children and the black-eyed adults are aliens. That's one of the theories that are out there. And I went over the theory a little bit and I talked about it, and it does have some points that make a lot of sense. But I tend to believe that these things are demonic. I agree with you there. Because the black eyes are a dead giveaway. A lot of the abilities that they have are a dead giveaway. But I don't think it's just a demonic entity like we're used to seeing a demonic entity. Because there's a lot of demonic entities out there. There's a lot of things that are demonic. There's a lot of demons that possess people. We've seen it throughout time. It's nothing new. This is a new phenomenon, what's going on with these black-eyed children and now the black-eyed adults. So what I think this is not a normal demonic entity. I'm beginning to think that this is demonic, but it is something ancient. This is something that is new to the world, but ancient. It's something that's been locked away for a long, long time. And I think the reason why it's starting to come out now, and you're starting to see these black-eyed children and black-eyed adult reports, is because whatever demonic entity this is that's causing this, they were locked away for the majority of time. And I think the reason that they're out now is because we're reaching the end. We're getting closer to the rapture. We're getting closer to the end of days, Armageddon, the apocalypse. And it talks about in the Bible how a lot of things will be let loose before the apocalypse. A lot of, it says like it will be like in the days of Noah. The last days will be like the days of Noah. In the days of Noah, we had giants. We had all kinds of demonic entities running around. We had spirits. We had all kinds of really crazy paranormal things happening on the earth. And I think that the black-eyed children and now the black-eyed adults, I think they're just the beginning. I think that a lot of things are being let loose. A lot of seals are going to start dropping, and a lot of this stuff is going to start happening. And it's going to get very, very interesting, very, very quick. Now, whether that's because, the veil is being lifted and these things are coming from another dimension, and that's where they were, or whether they are locked up inside the earth somewhere and they're being released, I don't know. But that's my gut feeling on this, is what we're dealing with is not some sort of alien or not some sort of new paranormal creature. I think what we're dealing with is an ancient evil that has been locked away and has now been released upon the world. I mean, that's my opinion. What do you think of that, old boy?
I might be totally agreeing with you on this. And I'm going to tell you why. There is some evil in this world we don't even know of. And there's some things even worse that, because I'm going to get into some things. Certain books talk about the ancient ones. And this could be the start of it. And it could be an evil that we don't even know. And that's why at first I was saying Reapers, but I was thinking about Reapers don't do this. This is new. This is something even different. This is a new way the evil can pounce on somebody. And they want to take the world over. Don't get it wrong. So you might have a theory there. They might be a whole new line of creatures. Or not demons, sorry. Demons, or something even worse than demons. Because people got to realize the devil is no demon, he's an archangel. And he took 1/3 of them with him. So whatever this is may not even be a demon. This might be a new entity. We might be dealing with a whole new entity. And something we never even dealt with before man was even around. Because it talks about the Jinn. And this could be something new, like James was talking about. Something even more evil that the world's never seen before. And some door got opened just in the last, I think it's since 98, 96, somewhere around there, the 90s. And this door has been opened. And just to let James in the story, back in 2000, right before it turned 2000, when they thought the world was going to go, remember the millennium, they thought the world was going to, Y2K was going to happen. I kid you not, after it hit midnight, when it hit 2000, I felt like something it was foggy, and it never gets foggy, like something was released on the world. It was real weird. It's back in 2000. And ever since, I've had that feeling. I've never had a feeling like that before, but it was like something got released. And we're seeing it. And whatever you believe in, there's something there. And it's out there. And I don't know what it is. We don't know what everything is. Remember, we're not experts. We're just trying to learn stuff just like you guys are to listen to the show. But this is something new to me. I've only known a little bit about it the last couple of years, and James has only known a little bit about it. And I think you're right, James. This is a whole new creature, new demon, new monster.
What's so interesting about it, too, is there's a definite clue in the way these things speak. They're able to speak a few phrases in English, but they don't understand context. They don't understand syntax. They don't understand exactly the rhythm of speaking and the way we speak now. It has a very old-timey feel to it. And the words don't quite line up the way they're supposed to line up all the time. And I think that's a very large clue, because if these things are ancient demonic entities, that have been locked away, then the language that they would be familiar with would be either ancient Sumerian, Aramaic, or Hebrew. One of those three languages most likely is what these things would be familiar with. And if you look at the grammar of those languages, it's a lot different than the grammar we use today. The way they form their sentences, you see that even in, from Spanish to English, how they'll have the words in the sentence mixed up a little bit. And when you're actually translating it over, you're like, this is strange. I have to kind of reverse the sentence in order for it to make sense. And if you remember Hebrew, you're reading it from right to left. You're not reading it from left to right. A lot of those old languages, the entire grammatical sentence structure is different than what we're used to. So if you're talking about an entity that is familiar with that way of speaking from back in those times, and then it has to try to translate what it's thinking and what it's going to say over to English, it would stand to reason that it's going to sound a little off. They're not going to have the rhythm right. They're not going to have the wording exactly right. And it's going to be a very old feel to the way they talk. Because you'll see that even in today's society. If you look at an old person, somebody in their 60s or 70s, or hell, even somebody like me who's in my 40s, and you go and you get a teenager, we can't barely communicate. Because they're talking about, oh, it's so bay and like this and that. And I have no idea in hell what they're talking about half the time. And we're only separated by a couple decades. Imagine that separation by a millennia or two. Imagine the difference, not only in language, as far as being a totally different language with different words, but just in the rhythm of the speech and the way we speak. If you look back at not only the Bible, but a lot of the old classics like Shakespeare and Dickens and stuff like that, it was what we consider nowadays to be proper English. The these and thous and shout and all that. That stuff is very difficult for us to read, whether you're reading the King James Version of the Bible or you're reading Shakespeare or any of that older literature. It's hard for us to read that today because the way they spoke is so much different than the way we speak today. And even though it's the same basic language and we can understand what they're saying, it has a real old formal feel to it. And I think we see some of that in the way the black-eyed children and the black-eyed adults tend to speak. In all the reports I've seen of the black-eyed children, if they were actual human children of that age, they would be using the slang that children of that age use. And you don't see that. It's a very formal way they speak. And they only say a few phrases. So I think that's a definite clue, and it's very, very interesting to me. And I look for things like that when I'm doing research. These little things that most people won't notice or recognize, they'll just shine like a bright light to me. And I'll just zone in on it. And I'm like, that's something important. And I will hone in on it, and I will figure that out. And it always leads to a lot of really cool discoveries. So that's something I wanted to throw in, because to me that seems like a flashing red sign that gives me a very big clue as to what these things are. And that's what led me to start thinking that it's something ancient. And if it's something demonic, I mean, we know that a lot of the fallen angels that originally fell with Lucifer from heaven are locked up under the earth until the end times. What if some of them have been released because we're in the end times or we're coming up to the end times? It's possible. What if it's some other entity like that? Maybe not the fallen angels themselves, but some other entity from that same time period. Some of the creatures that lived in the darkness before God created the earth. I mean, because you had leviathans, you had all kinds of stuff back then. What if some of those creatures that have been locked away are now being released and making their way onto the earth? For those that aren't really into the Bible, if you are a horror fan or you're into the paranormal at all, you should really give the Bible a read. Even if you're not a believer. especially the book of Revelations, because there's some amazingly cool stuff in there. I mean, there's stuff that would make an unbelievable horror movie that happens in the book of Revelations that talk about the creatures that are going to be on the earth in the end times and the torments that people are going to go through in the tribulation period. It is fascinatingly horrifying stuff. So I think we might be headed towards that time. I'm not saying the end is nigh, it's coming tomorrow. I'm not saying that. I have no idea when the rapture is going to be. None. And I'm not going to claim to. But I'm saying we're seeing a lot more paranormal activity than we ever have. We're seeing a lot more creatures that have never existed before, that we don't even know what the hell they are. They're starting to show themselves. And we're seeing some of the old favorites come back. We're getting a lot of reports of giants. You know, those were the Nephilim. We're getting a lot of reports of all kinds of stuff from that time period. Shifters, werewolves, vampires, all kinds of stuff that people think are all make-believe. But they're starting to be very credible reports. I just put a video up on the YouTube channel yesterday or the day before about a Nessie-like creature that washed up on the shore of Georgia. And it's a crystal clear picture, clear as day. It just happened Friday. This creature washed up on the beach, and I swear to you, it looks exactly like the Loch Ness Monster, just smaller. So if you haven't seen that yet, go to the YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/James Hershey Jr. and check out that video. It'll blow you away. I mean, it is such an amazingly clear picture. And it's not a hoax. It's not something somebody submitted. This stuff was actually checked out by the police and by the government. It's real. Okay? It comes from an actual news site, from a news channel that did a report on it. It was found. They're trying to figure out what the hell it was. To me, it looks exactly like a Loch Ness Monster kind of creature. So go to the YouTube channel and check that out. We are just about out of time, so I'm going to throw back over to Old Boy so that he can give his shout-outs and everything.
Thank you, brother. And I want to let everybody know, is like James was saying, there is stuff that we don't even know that has never been seen. There's stuff that we haven't seen or read. There's stuff that's been hidden from us, too. So just remember, it could be something new. Remember, when the angels fall, not all of them, what I've read, were all happy with Lucifer after this. There was actually a couple demons that I've had read that went on rogue on their own in hell. So, and some of them are just as evil as him. So we'll just, like I said, I want to thank everybody for listening to the show every week. We love you. We just started our own merchandise, and it's 2 pages, and James will tell you in a minute where to go. If you guys want to pick up a shirt with Staring in the Abyss, or me, or James Hershey, or James Hershey's books, you guys can now. There's shirts, pants, leggings for women, baby clothes, mugs, iPhone cases, all kinds of stuff. Check it out. You want to subscribe to James Hershey and listen to all our old shows on YouTube, do it. We just hit over 2,000 subscribers. I want to thank everybody for that. And just go, if you want to listen to our old shows, you can listen to them, our newer shows, or check us out on Parax Radio whenever you guys get a chance. They play us every week, Sundays at midnight Eastern. So, and I think they play a show, the old show, the hour after that. So you guys want to check that out too. They always play a rerun of another show. But I love you. I hope everybody has a good night. Blessed be. I love my family, James Hershey, my fans, my daughter, my girlfriend. I want everybody to have a great weekend. And remember, you only live once, so live it up. Demon hunters, misfits, and sugar ladies, I love you.
This has been an extremely interesting show, I think. The first show we did on Black-Eyed Children had a whole lot of information. It was a really good show as well. This one was primarily focused on the black-eyed adults, and I had that one story about the black-eyed children. And that, I think, was really interesting as well, and we learned a lot on this show. I think we kind of honed in a little bit on what these things might be, and a little bit of the reasoning behind it, possibly. Let me get the links out real quick. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/James Hershey Jr. The Patreon page, if you guys want to donate to support the show, is patreon.com/James Hershey Jr. And Old Boy mentioned that we have merchandise available now as well. The website for that is teespring.com/staring into the abyss. On that site, you will find t-shirts, you will find towels, posters, canvas prints, iPhone cases, Android cases, mouse pads, you name it. There's a whole bunch of stuff there. Hoodies, all kinds of stuff. So if you guys are looking to have merch, if you're interested in that, teespring.com/staring into the abyss. Some really, really cool products there. I designed them all myself. I think you'll really like them. We are working on a second store as well. I'm still designing products for that store, and it's going to have a lot of different things as well. When that is finalized and done, I will get you the link to that as well, the address, so that you can find it. But for now, the teespring.com/staring into the abyss will have you covered for a whole bunch of different merch. I want to thank everybody for listening to the show. I want to thank you all for all of your support. We talked a little bit at the end of this show about the apocalypse and about the end times. In the future, at some point, I'm going to do a show on the apocalypse. I think it'll be very, very interesting, and I think that you guys can really learn a lot and enjoy the show. I try not to do too many shows like that because I know that not all of our audience are believers, so I don't want you guys to tune in every week and just hear a sermon every week. So I try to do a bunch of different topics and a bunch of different things that not only interest me, but will also interest you as well. So I hope that we're succeeding in doing that, and I hope that you guys are finding value in what we do and that you're enjoying it. Last week, for the fairy show, we played a different song at the end of the show than the Staring into the Abyss theme, Ghost of You and Me. I kind of like doing that. I'm going to do that every once in a while. I think it's kind of fun. I enjoy the music, and I think you guys probably enjoy it as well. So in that vein, we're going to do another new song tonight for the end of the show. This song is going to tie in a little bit with the theme of the apocalypse and the theme of what we were talking about a little bit tonight. And that song is going to be called Never Let You Go. It's another song by John Hammond and his band Calvary's Redemption. It's a very, very, very cool song, and I hope that you guys enjoy it. So after I'm done blabbing on, I'll play that for you. But thanks again for tuning in every week. Thanks for tuning in on ParaX. Thanks for coming to the YouTube channel and for watching the shows there and for checking out the other videos. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the support more than you guys will ever know. You guys really mean a hell of a lot to me. And I do what I do for you guys, to try to spread some knowledge and to try to come up with some answers to some of these questions that have been bugging me for most of my life, and I'm sure have been probably bugging a lot of you as well. I'm not always going to get everything 100% right. Nobody on this planet ever can. We're only human. But my promise to you is that I'm always going to do my best to try to give you an information-filled show, but also something that is enjoyable for you to listen to, that you can have a good time while you're here. Because to me, that's kind of important too. Because if I just get up here and give you a whole bunch of facts, you're going to be bored out of your mind and you're going to tune to another channel. I hope that I'm doing a good job. If you guys like the show, please check out the YouTube channel as well, because there's more than just the show on that YouTube channel. On that channel, I have all kinds of other videos. I talked a little bit about the new video I just put up with the Loch Ness Monster creature that washed up on the shores of Georgia. That's super, super cool. And I think that you guys would really dig that video. In the video, I put up the picture for the majority of the video so you can get a really good look at this thing. And it'll just blow your mind. There's another one on the channel about a mermaid corpse that washed up not too long ago. That also has a very good picture. I've got all kinds of cool evidence videos on there, and I've also got the shows, obviously, and other things. So please go check that out. Subscribe to the channel so that you can see all the stuff when it comes out. And just once again, thank you guys. I love you so much. And until I speak to you again, love many, trust few, and do harm to none. God loves you, and so do we. Enjoy the music, guys. Bye-bye.
We all have our problems. We all have our doubts. We live in this crazy world that just brings us down. Diseases and famines, the natural disasters. We just keep on praying and wait for the answers. God said, just come closer to me, and I'll come closer to you. Just keep asking and you're gonna receive it. Just keep knocking and the door will be open. Just keep seeking and you're gonna find him. And it's never gonna let you, never gonna let you go. Alright, we're all born as sinners, but we're children of the Most High. Just confess to the Father and have faith in Jesus Christ. He said, just come closer to me, and I'll come closer to you. Just keep asking and you're gonna receive it. Just keep knocking and the door will be open. Just keep seeking and you're gonna find him. Those who give, more will be given. Just keep asking and you're gonna receive it. Just keep knocking and the door will be open. Just keep seeking and you're gonna find him. And he's never gonna let you, never gonna let you go. Oh no, he's never gonna let you go. Oh no. God said, just come closer to me, and I'll come closer to you. Believe in the truth. Just come closer to me, and I'll come closer to you. Just keep asking and you're gonna receive it. Just keep knocking and the door will be open. Just keep seeking and you're gonna find him. That those who give, more will be